This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. That massive sewage leak in the Red River has slowed significantly, but it's not over yet. And community leaders downstream are already furious over what's headed their way. CBC's Cameron McLean reports how one city councillor even wants the province to fine Winnipeg $1 billion.
A gushing river of sewage, now down to a trickle. Last night, crews got a second pump working on this bypass system. New city numbers show about 300,000 litres of sewage was dumped in the last 24 hours, a fraction of the 7 million litres that poured into the river yesterday. In total, the leak has spilled more than 225 million litres of sewage into the river since it began on February 7th. At City Council today, Transcona Councillor Russ Wyatt called for the province to fine the city $4 for every litre spilled.
I'm saying that until the City of Winnipeg starts to actually actively get its house in order with regards to the sewage spills, we have to be accountable. Right now, we're not.
That motion took Mayor Scott Gillingham by surprise.
Surprised would be an understatement. When you look at it, to ask the province to fine us close to $1 billion is I don't think responsible.
The province says it is investigating the spill. Meanwhile, community leaders north of Winnipeg say the city never contacted them to inform them. Gordon Blue Sky is the chief of Broken Head First Nation.
These waterways are very important, not just for our First Nation, but also many communities, First Nation, non-First Nation along the lake.
Pollution from wastewater has been linked to toxic algae blooms on Lake Winnipeg, which suck oxygen out of the water, choking plant and animal life. Richard Grosshans is a water scientist with the International Institute for Sustainable Development.
We have to figure out what impact that's going to have on the larger system. It's not good. You know, wastewater is never good to put into your river and your lake. So now we have to figure out how bad this impact could be.
The city is still asking people living in southwest Winnipeg to reduce their water use while crews work on improving the bypass system. That work is expected to be finished in the coming days. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Problems are piling up for Manitoba Hydro. Its debt is up to nearly $25 billion. It will have to spend billions more to beef up generating capacity as we move away from fossil fuels. And the new NDP government is demanding a rate freeze, which will curtail revenue. Now, as CBC's Bartley Kivas reports, the Crown Corporation just got some more bad news.
Bare lawns in Morden, Manitoba, in February. A Winnipeg river trail that only managed to be frozen enough to skate for 9 days. This winter has been dry and mild, and that spelled trouble for Manitoba Hydro. A water shortage has left Hydro with less power to export. It's now projecting a loss of $190 million this fiscal year, instead of a $450 million profit. This has only added to Hydro's challenges right now, challenges compounded by a new political direction. The new NDP government has handed Manitoba Hydro a difficult task: build up generating capacity at a cost of billions while not adding significantly to Manitoba Hydro's debt, and sometime in this term, freeze hydro rates for a year.
There's a lot of prongs to that equation.
Ben Graham's new board chair for Manitoba Hydro. He's been told to find a way to increase generating capacity without relying on the private sector.
The analysis will consider every possible option that we can pull levers on to meet everyone's needs.
The official opposition says Hydro's flirting with disaster after firing its CEO and scrapping an energy plan created by the PCs.
I am very concerned that the NDP have no plan. And when you have no plan, they're just shooting from the hip, and that's going to result in some catastrophic damage for this province.
Abhi Khan says he's concerned the NDP's dawdling on developing more generating capacity, but the Premier is downplaying warnings about a capacity crunch.
We have tons of megawatts of clean, low-carbon hydroelectricity in Manitoba, and it's going to power our economic advantage for generations to come.
As for the hydro rate freeze, that won't happen anytime soon.
We're still committed to delivering a one-year rate freeze, but we're going to have to wait longer to see how conditions change in the future.
In other words, the weather will determine whether the NDP will keep the rate freeze promise. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Ottawa's putting up to $16 million to support a new downtown Winnipeg housing project. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland was here in Winnipeg this afternoon to tour the construction site. The building at 308 Colony Street will have 214 rental units. Freeland says that includes 86 affordable homes for low-income people. She called the construction project a model for others to follow.
You can't tell when you knock on the door whether you're knocking on the door of affordable housing or market rate housing. That's one of the things that makes this a real community.
The project is being led by the University of Winnipeg Community Renewal Corporation. It will include an outdoor green space terrace, a gym and a lounge, as well as ground floor commercial spaces. Provincial and federal money is also expected to help enhance vital infrastructure in northern Manitoba. $60 million will be used to finish upgrades and cover future costs of the Hudson Bay Railway, the only land link connecting Churchill to the south. Funds will also support the Port of Churchill's redevelopment. A government source tells CBC News the two levels of government will each contribute $30 million. Manitoba Premier Wam Kanu and Federal Northern Affairs Minister Dan Vandal will make the official announcement on this tomorrow in Churchill. Emergency shelters are supposed to be stopgap measures in Manitoba's child welfare system, but people involved say the province's strained system is leaning too heavily on them, putting vulnerable kids at risk. The CBC's Caitlin Gowerlich has more.
It sort of makes you feel like you're forgotten, or you're just placed here to be forgotten or be like pushed off to the side.
Those are Joshua Niepenak's memories of staying in an emergency shelter as a teen in the child welfare system. Each time he'd run away, catching a bus to his grandparents' house. He felt safest with them, but it took the system a while to agree.
It didn't feel like I mattered because like I wasn't being heard, and I wasn't, like when I tried to say that I wanted to stay with my grandparents and they kept bringing me back here.
He bounced around that system for years, going house to house and bus to bus. The province says the locations of the emergency shelters are confidential, but we know some of the shelters Niepenak stayed in are in residential areas like this. There are 46 of those shelters in Manitoba, 39 in Winnipeg, and 7 in other parts of the province.
We wanted to look into emergency placements after a 14-year-old girl was killed in downtown Winnipeg in December. A day before that girl died, her social worker said she was likely going to end up in one of those placements because there just wasn't money for the kind of specialized placement that she needed. Those shelters are supposed to be stopgap measures in Manitoba's child welfare system, places for kids who have nowhere else to go. But foster mom Jamie Fow says emergency placements are being overused.
The staff there are very well-intentioned and well-meaning, but they do not have the training and capacity to respond to the needs of these high-needs children. If the province feels it necessary to apprehend these children from their homes, they should have a place for that child. That isn't an emergency placement and then we'll figure it out later. That's so irresponsible.
Driving back last month through an area where he often stayed in an emergency shelter brought back memories for Joshua Niepenak of how ignored and isolated he felt. It's a time he thinks of now when he works as an action therapist with youth in the community.
To make sure that they know that somebody cares for them and somebody, like wants them around and wants them, to succeed in life.
But as lonely as those times were, they feel a world away from his life now, as a university student and a father to a 3-year-old girl. Caitlin Gowerlich, CBC News, Winnipeg.
RCMP say the Crown has charged a Carberry woman for allegedly stealing $30,000 from the Carberry Curling Club. Police were notified of this in December, that there was something to investigate. After they investigated, a volunteer who served as treasurer for the curling club was charged. RCMP believe the accused later used unauthorized funds from the RM of North Cyprus Langford to repay the curling club. She was chief administrative officer of that RM at the time. She's facing a charge of theft over $5,000. Manitoba Public Health says an outbreak of measles could be only a plane ride away. Parents are being encouraged to make sure children here are vaccinated. A Toronto infant was hospitalized with measles last week. Cases are on the rise in Europe because of low vaccination rates. Here in Manitoba, Dr. Devinder Singh says the most recent statistics show that in 2022, just over 68% of children had been vaccinated against measles by the time they were 7. That's a drop from 71% the year before in 2021. Singh says part of the issue during the pandemic was that public health nurses were in the fight against COVID.
Public health is also the main immunizer for immunizations for our school-age program. So just with the demands of combating the pandemic in other ways, and unfortunately that led to access issues related to immunizing, during the height of the pandemic.
Dr. Singh says since then, parents have been sent reminder letters and vaccination clinics are in schools so children can be up to date with their shots. He says the last case of measles in Manitoba was in 2019. Time now to check in with our weather specialist, Riley Laychuk.
Another lovely day, at least in the south.
Yes, absolutely.
Although a bit windy.
A bit windy, yeah.
Some colder weather on the way, Janet, which I'll talk about right now. Looking at temperatures, you can see on the map here just where those colder temperatures are sinking south. This because of that area of low pressure that's skirted across northern Manitoba. Behind that, a cold front and high pressure, which is going to drop our temperatures as we get through the night tonight. So Winnipeg at -2, Gimli already at -6, and approaching the -20s already in parts of northern Manitoba. And if we advance into the overnight period here, you can see how this pocket of cold air sinks south starting Friday morning at about -15 in Winnipeg. That's my forecast overnight temperature for tonight. -17 in the Dauphin region, and even some -30s on the map in far northern Manitoba. Churchill, Tuduli Lake, Thompson approaching that -30 mark. So yeah, prepare for what I'll say is a bit of a more seasonal overnight tonight, which would be at about -16 for the Winnipeg region. So, and even as we get into the later part of Friday, by the supper hour, temperatures really not going much further than about -6 or -7 across southern Manitoba tomorrow. So skies are clearing out. We did see a few stray flurries moving through the Interlake and through Eastman through the afternoon today as expected, but otherwise a sunny sky today. Windy conditions though, which we'll talk about as we get through the show tonight, just how windy it was in some parts of the province today, because boy oh boy, we did see that especially out on open areas today. So looking at Thursday into Friday here, you can see this area of high pressure starts to skirt its way across the province and leaving behind it mainly sunny skies through the day tomorrow, but a little bit more snow, more scattered in nature across northern Manitoba as we get through the day. Friday into Saturday, some of that could even mix into the southern part of the province. So I do have a slim chance of flurries in the forecast for the later part of Saturday as we head into Sunday. Otherwise, we're looking at a mix of sun and clouds as we head through into Saturday. So winds today, we did see some pockets of gusting upwards of 60 in southern Manitoba. As we get through the night tonight, we'll start to see the winds start to die off a little bit, 15 gusting 30 by the time we get to the afternoon in Winnipeg. So winds gusting to 44, that's been pretty constant through the afternoon today. We'll see those winds staying breezy as we get through the night tonight. -15 overnight in Winnipeg with a partly cloudy sky. -14 tomorrow morning, clearing, and we'll see breezy conditions through the morning hours tomorrow, but we'll start to see the winds begin to taper off a little bit as we get into the afternoon. -7, mainly sunny in the afternoon. North winds still gusting up to 30, but we'll see that start to taper off as we get into the later part of Friday. +6 On Saturday, there's that chance of some flurries overnight Saturday into Sunday. And then, Janet, we're dancing around the freezing mark into early next week, but we do have fairly good chance we could see some light snow. Nothing accumulating at this point, but certainly some light snow coming our way for Tuesday.
And still a high of 6 for Saturday.
Still have that 6 in there.
I can't believe. Thank you so much, Riley. We'll
You're
check in
welcome.
with you a little later. 6 on Saturday. This is Human Trafficking Awareness Day. The Winnipeg-based Joy Smith Foundation is dedicated to educating Canadians about the issue, because experts say human trafficking is preventable if people know what signs to look for. I spoke with the foundation's president and CEO, Janet Campbell, this afternoon.
It's extremely prevalent. We talk about within 1 kilometer of where you're sitting right now, Janet, and from where I'm sitting right now, somebody is being lured into the sex trade. We have experienced an exponential growth with online connections and online luring and grooming that takes place. And so what that does is it provides unprecedented reach for predators to access their victims. Certainly, I would encourage people to go and explore our website and look for those signs. They will learn what the most common signs are. And oftentimes, I think these signs are things that people will think is just, something, a phase or something insignificant. And if people do pay attention to the signs and when they see them, they really take the opportunity to look at the situation more closely, they can definitely play a role in helping to prevent others from being victimized.
What sort of damage, lasting damage, is done to a victim of trafficking?
Well, it's a very complex issue, and the impact on an individual when they have been victimized is nothing short of monumental. It can include physical implications. It can include emotional and mental implications. Survivors will suffer from PTSD. And in addition to that, there may be, they may have been introduced to drugs or alcohol during the time of their victimization. And so they need to overcome that. And it's extremely challenging for a victim to get away and then to be able to restore their life. They not only have to address the basic needs, but they have all of these other factors that are a consideration as well. So it's definitely a tremendous journey when somebody gets away from a situation like this and works towards restoring their life.
And this can happen to anyone?
Can happen to anyone.
Not just, people in another neighborhood. This can happen in any neighborhood.
No, I think that people are becoming more comfortable with hearing the term human trafficking, and they think that they're fairly knowledgeable or aware that this is something that is happening. But what my experience has been is that people do tend to continue to think that this is another community, it's another family, and it couldn't be further from the truth. This truly can happen to anybody.
Janet Campbell, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
A judge has ruled the man convicted of killing 4 members of a Muslim family also committed terrorism. The 23-year-old drove a pickup truck into the family while they were out for an evening walk. We'll have more on the sentence and the family's reaction after the break. The man convicted already of killing 4 members of a Muslim family in London, Ontario, was sentenced to life in prison today. The judge also ruled that his actions in June 2021 amounted to terrorism. CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick has more on what that means.
It was the decision loved ones of the Afzaal family and members of London's Muslim community were hoping for. Nathaniel Veltman's crimes amounted to terrorism. That's according to Justice Renee Pomerantz. She delivered the ruling in front of a full courtroom as part of Veltman's final sentencing hearing. Pomerantz said it was an inescapable conclusion that Veltman committed a terrorist act and that one might go so far as to characterize this as a textbook example of terrorist activity. She described his crimes as brutal, vile, and cruel, and said he wanted to not only kill the Afzaal family, but to commit a crime against all Muslims by threatening their sense of safety and security. Pomerantz said she knows the trial was painful for many, but hopes the denunciation of Veltman's actions will assist their healing journey. Family members said they don't know if the ruling represents justice or closure. For them, the healing journey is still a long road ahead, they said.
There are so many people who will daily go through some element of June 6th that their closure is not possible. What is possible is to channel June 6th into positive change.
Relatives said they will honor their loved ones by fighting against Islamophobia. Canada's special representative on combating Islamophobia said she's relieved by the ruling.
Today's decision sends a very strong message that Muslims in Canada must be protected against ideologically motivated violent extremism. It affirms that targeted, heinous, and hate-motivated attacks like this one are acts of terrorism, and perpetrators will and must face the full extent of the law.
This was the first case where prosecutors argued in front of a jury that murders were motivated by white nationalism and that the crimes amounted to terrorism. The designation does not impact Veltman's sentence, but it could influence the programs he's offered in prison and be a factor if he applies for parole. Veltman was sentenced today to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years for the murders of Yumna, who was just 15 years old, her parents, Mediha and Salman's mother, Talat. The 23-year-old was also sentenced to life in prison for the attempted murder of the little boy who survived. He was 9 years old at the time. He's been left an orphan and has serious injuries. Veltman's defense lawyers say they're awaiting a decision from their client on whether he wants to appeal the convictions. Megan Fitzpatrick, CBC News, London.
International technology experts and advocates are sounding the alarm about deep fakes. Deep fakes are images generated by artificial intelligence. It could be videos, photographs, voices that seem real. Sam Sampson reports on efforts to get lawmakers to tackle the problem.
This is fake.
Which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time.
This is also fake.
I am not Morgan Freeman, and what you see is not real.
Deepfakes look real, but they're non-consensual AI-generated material. Now, this open letter from hundreds of experts urges governments globally to take immediate action against deepfakes and those who spread them, suggesting criminal penalties for creators of harmful AI-generated content, such as child pornography, and repercussions for tech companies who don't prevent their tools from being used. Many worry how that fake content could have real implications on elections in more than 50 countries this year, like this fake robocall.
Voting this Tuesday only enables the Republicans in their quest to elect Donald Trump again.
It sounds like President Joe Biden telling voters to stay home for the New Hampshire primary last month, but it wasn't him.
For the first time, the technology to create very compelling deepfakes is available not just to sophisticated state actors, but to individuals. That's just a warning of what we're about to see, which I think of as a tsunami of disinformation.
In Canada, 8 provinces have intimate image protection laws, meaning victims whose images are shared without their consent can sue for damages in civil court. But only half of those include altered images like deepfakes. Ottawa is actively working on AI laws, but they might not pass until this fall at the earliest.
Responsible government needs to be ready.
This AI governance advocate wants Canada to get ahead of the problem, not react to it.
As easy as it is to make a deepfake, we need to make it as easy as it is to take them to account for it.
Experts say rely on your critical thinking to spot deep fakes. If a video or an image gets a big reaction out of you, pause, consider what it's telling you, where it might be coming from. Asking questions, they say, is going to be key as AI gets better at distorting reality. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Regina.
The European Union's police agency says it has shut down one of the biggest migrant smuggling networks in Europe. Europol says 19 people have been arrested in Germany following a large-scale operation by German, French, and Belgian police. Investigators say the suspects purchased 10 passenger inflatable boats to smuggle migrants from France to Britain across the English Channel, 10 passenger boats. Authorities say the gang would put up to 50 migrants in these 10 passenger boats and charge up to $4,300 per person for the very risky crossing. Violence erupted again in the West Bank today with a roadside shooting. At least one person was killed and several others were wounded. At least 2 of the suspected gunmen were killed as well, fired on by Israeli police and civilian. The CBC's Abby Kuavasan reports.
During the morning rush hour into Jerusalem, Israeli police say 3 Palestinian suspects shot at drivers on a highway near an Israeli checkpoint in the occupied West Bank. The wounded were taken to a hospital. An Israeli police spokesperson says it was a tragic morning.
Large police forces arrived to the scene and managed to neutralize 2 terrorists on the scene of the attack and 1 who was attempting to flee. They managed to neutralize that threat as well. Like I said, we're in a time of war, and our level of readiness is heightened.
A far-right member of Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition government has commented from the site. He called for even more checkpoints to restrict the movement of Palestinians in the name of Israeli security. Tensions in the West Bank have only surged following Hamas's October 7th attacks and Israel's bombardment of Gaza. There has been a military crackdown through what Israel calls counterterrorism operations, with thousands of Palestinians being detained and frequent raids. These images show the aftermath of a raid in Jenin. Israeli forces left behind damaged homes, torn up roads, and burnt cars. The IDF considers Jenin a hotbed of terrorism. Meanwhile, Human Rights Watch says Israeli settler violence has doubled since October 7th. There are reports of extremist settlers firing at Palestinians and seeking to encroach on their land. Israel has built more than 130 settlements in the territory since 1967, settlements that are considered illegal under international law. The UN says more than 350 Palestinians have been killed in the occupied West Bank since October 7th. The United States, United Kingdom, and France have sanctioned some of the settlers for their human rights abuses. Paris is seeking to take these sanctions to the European level. Abby Kuavasan, CBC News, Berlin.
This Saturday, Ukraine marks 2 years since Russia launched its full-scale invasion. And as Nicole Williams shows us, for Ukrainians who were forced to flee, including here to Canada, the war continues to shape their lives and their futures.
Even 2 years on, safe with a Canadian family, the memory of the war is still fresh for Oksana Orel.
We were hiding at night in basements, so it was a very scary time.
Orel and her husband planned to enlist to fight for Ukraine, but then she found out she was pregnant.
Unfortunately, a lot of kids in Ukraine died, and they're still dying. So that's why my priority was left my country.
Orel ended up giving birth to her daughter in Canada alone. Her husband still fighting in Ukraine, or at least she hopes. He's been missing since January of last year, and her homeland still being torn apart.
It's pure madness and hell. You can't be happy when your home on fire.
At Ottawa City Hall, a children's choir sings the Ukrainian national anthem to mark the dark anniversary, some of them far from home.
And I cried because I didn't want to go away.
More than 220,000 Ukrainians have arrived in Canada since the war began.
Many of us prayed that we wouldn't be standing here today, marking the second anniversary.
Ukraine says it's running out of ammunition. Canada has already donated many of its available artillery shells. Ukrainians here say providing their country with the weapons it needs should be top priority.
I am often asked, how and when is this war going to end? And I say that the only way is to end with victory for Ukraine.
Ukrainians in Canada continue to try and build a life here, but some say they haven't yet let go of the hope that someday they might be able to return home. Nicole Williams, CBC News, Ottawa.
Getting an early start on wildfire season. How people in Alberta are getting prepped for another smoldering summer. We'll bring you that story, and then Riley's back with our Manitoba forecast when we return. Last year's wildfire season in Alberta was devastating, and they've been having a similar winter to ours. With the exception of a super cold snap in January, it's been strangely mild and dry in Alberta, not nearly the snow they're used to getting. With fires from the summer still smoldering underground, Alberta officials have declared wildfire season is already here. The provincial government is working to get ready, and as CBC's Julia Wong reports, so are communities.
Last year, when wildfire threatened Drayton Valley, Lane Naprava jumped into action, helping to build fire guards.
Well, it's all our community too, right? And it's hard to sit back and, watch as everything's burning around you.
Now, he's one of dozens of people ready to volunteer in case the province becomes overwhelmed again. Among them, truck drivers and heavy equipment operators.
When there's a fire in the community, I want to help. The province doesn't have the resources as well. And consequently, everybody needs to pitch in on these things.
We're going to give you an overview of the incident command system.
That means learning emergency workflows and staying safe in the field, so it's seamless under pressure if or when the time comes.
We can't always wish problems away and hope that someone's going to come in to save us. The best solutions come from the ground floor.
A record 2.2 million hectares burned in Alberta last year. Wildfire season, which normally begins March 1st, started several days early. There are 55 active wildfires. Facing warm and dry conditions, Alberta could be in for another grim season.
Well, I think we're going to be more prepared than we were last year for sure.
Alberta's forestry minister says this season, the province will continue using nighttime firefighting helicopters, bring in ATV and fire bands sooner, and try and add 100 more firefighters to the front lines. It will also rely on volunteers, again.
No jurisdiction has the number of firefighters available, trained, ready to go, and employed on an annual basis to fight the worst fire year.
So we're going to give you some of that information today.
Back in Breton, there's a shared goal for those here.
I just want to keep communities safe, honestly.
More of these information sessions will be held in the coming weeks in a province where wildfire season is already underway. Julia Wong, CBC News, Breton, Alberta.
Our weather specialist Riley Lachuk's been taking a look at this. How widespread is this potential for drought or dryness?
Well, the drought conditions really extend right across Western Canada into parts of northwestern Ontario, Janet. We can take a look at a map here. This is from Agriculture Canada. This is the Canadian Drought Monitor, and you can see that, drought conditions fairly widespread right across Western Canada. Some of the worst conditions in southeastern Alberta, southwestern Saskatchewan were into that extreme and exceptional drought range. Here in southern and central Manitoba, we are in what is considered abnormally dry to moderate drought stage through the Brandon region into even parts of the Red River Valley. Now, this S and L indicates that there is the potential there for both short and long-term effects, just depending on how dry the conditions continue to be as we head into the spring. So, yeah, we are still needing precipitation for sure, really across southern Manitoba. So looking at temperatures across Western Canada, temperatures close to that -30 mark in northern Manitoba and parts of Nunavut. But look at Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, Regina, both at the freezing mark. And you can see really where that dividing line is between the warmer air and that cold Arctic air that is ushering its way a little bit further to the south. Into the United States, Fargo at 4 degrees, Minneapolis at 6 right now, and we're seeing more seasonal conditions, albeit still above seasonal for this time of the year through the southern part of Ontario. 7s for both Toronto and Windsor, -2 in Halifax. Closer to home, we're looking at a -6 in Selkirk, -2 at the Forks. So you can start to see where more closely where some of those colder temperatures are starting to move in already. -6 in Gimli, -13 in Barons River right now, and seeing temperatures approaching -30 for parts of northern Manitoba already, -25 for both Tadouli Lake and Churchill. Your forecast for tonight looks like this. We're looking at cloudy with clear breaks through northwestern Ontario, -15 in Fort Francis, -21 in the Dryden area. Through southeastern Manitoba, we're looking at pretty similar temperatures, right around -20. Temperatures really cooling off, where we're seeing some of that colder air and some of those clear skies moving in sooner here. So -19 in Gimli, but -12 in Emerson, where we'll see a little bit more cloud through into the overnight period tonight. Slim chance of flurries to southwestern Manitoba, -11 in the Melita region tonight and into northern Manitoba. Temperatures hitting -30 in some cases, and combined with a little bit of wind, this will mean frostbite on exposed skin in just a few minutes in some cases in the Churchill and the Thompson region. -13 tomorrow in Thompson, -15 in Gillam, -13 as well in Norway House. More sun than cloud through northern Manitoba tomorrow. That's the case for the southern part of the province as well. -3 in Swan River, -2 in Melita, -4 in Morden Winkler. These temperatures a bit closer to seasonal for this time of the year. -11 in Gimli, -7 in Winnipeg and the Steinbach region, which is seasonal for this time of the year. And northwestern Ontario looking at bright sunshine as well, and temperatures, Janet, at around -10. Your 7-day forecast is coming up.
Can't wait to see it. Thank you, Riley.
You're welcome.
Customers at a hair salon in Newfoundland can be forgiven if they feel like they're being watched. They probably are being watched. Not unlike cafes we've seen popping up around Manitoba, this salon has a sideline, adopting out abandoned cats. CBC's Martin Jones has the story.
The Strand Salon in Gander has a special relationship with the local SPCA shelter. Co-owners Amber Hanlon and Amy Cheeks have been fostering cats for about a year now. Sally is the latest furry addition, making her the salon's 16th foster cat.
Her nickname is Dainty Ankles because she's so small. So she's 3 years old. She came from a home that had a lot of other cats. She didn't have the best upbringing. She was super, super shy when we got her, but now she's been laying down in clients' laps. She's very food motivated. She loves a treat and loves to be pet. So she's really playful. She's great.
Sally has made herself at home at the Strand. The customers, well, they don't seem to mind one bit.
I had a client yesterday who is afraid of cats, but she said since she's been coming here and seeing the cats in like an environment where it's kind of like controlled, she feels more comfortable around them now.
Hanlon and Cheeks admit they never expected to foster 16 cats in a single year. But it turns out their partnership with the Gander SPCA really works.
A lot of cats that we had, they had been at the shelter for over 200 days without an adoption, and they come here and they've been here for 6 days and have left. Wow. So, like, we had one cat and she was here for 3 hours and got adopted. It was, in 1 week we had 3 cats adopted.
One of our cats had a problem where she had licked all her fur off. So while she was here, her fur grew back. So I don't know if it's like a salon thing or if it's just like a relaxation thing, but she really felt comfortable here enough to like stop licking all her fur off.
So we'll take all the riffraff. Yeah. We'll take whoever.
Martin Jones, CBC News, Gander.
Coming up, learning history through food. An international chef from right here in Winnipeg is back in town for a special Black History Month event. I'll tell you all about it after the break. Rob Thomas is a Winnipegger with a career that sounds incredibly cool. He's an international chef. He flies to different countries to cook for various clients. But he's back in our city tonight to cook for a group of 22 very lucky people who booked their seats long in advance. It is his third year presenting a meal and a related history lesson as part of Black History Month. Those of us not in the Lucky 22 can still watch a video stream of the event on Black History Manitoba's YouTube channel. I spoke with Chef Rob yesterday and started by asking him how history and food are linked.
Every food has a history. The history tells the story of how we got to the food, and it really is the soul of the food, because there's meaning behind everything. There was always a reason why certain foods were prepared in certain ways, whether it was, ingredient-based or resource-based, availability. That's all ingrained in the history. So history really plays out in food, I think, a lot more than people think.
Well, I know it does in personal history. You know, we can all think of that thing that our parent made for us that made us feel particularly loved and warms our souls when we feel down. So we know that there's that personal, emotional connection. But what about on a larger cultural scale?
On a larger cultural scale, it's very interesting because it does tie, to certain degrees, it ties into the personal and emotional. But when it comes to the deep history of it, it's really wrapped around tradition. And tradition is something that all cultures try and hold and preserve, and not saying that there's, dishes can't evolve, but the history really tells the struggles and the triumphs of the people who created the cuisine.
Now, the Black diaspora is enormous. There's Caribbean, there's African, how do you decide what to make?
Well, it's deciding what to make is actually very, very difficult for me, because I realize that there's only a certain amount of time that we can cook a demo for. There's only a certain amount of food that you can make. So I really try and find things that I actually have a connection to, and also, recipes that I've researched that I actually really want to dive into and learn more about. So it becomes a learning process both ways.
You just returned from grocery shopping for Thursday night's dinner. What are you going to make?
Well, so for Thursday night, I have a few dishes. I am going to be making a macaroni pie, not to be confused with mac and cheese. Macaroni pie is a very Caribbean type of dish. A lot of islands do it. I'm also going to be making a version of a braised chicken, Haitian style, which is really great because I know a little bit of Haitian food, but I don't cook it very often. So I thought this was a great platform to do it. Then there's mandazi, which are African style donuts. And then there will be cocoa tea, which is the Caribbean version of hot chocolate. It's called either cocoa tea or chocolate tea, and it's traditionally served around Christmas, but over the years it's just got to be a very common hot drink in the Caribbean as well. So I'm going to pull off 4 dishes.
Remind me to book a space for next year.
Yes, you definitely have to. You definitely have to, because I always keep on trying to one-up myself. So these demos are only getting better and better.
Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me tonight. Have a great deal of fun on Thursday.
Thank you very much.
Turkey crossing. Riley, was traveling down Highway 3 near Carmen this afternoon, and he shot this video for us. They actually had to wait as these turkeys crossed the road. Why did the turkeys cross the road? Your 7-day forecast is next.
Well, here's a look at your day planner for your Friday. Expect much cooler conditions across southern Manitoba for tomorrow. So waking up at about -14 in Winnipeg, northwest winds gusting to 40. Start to diminish as we get through into the noon hour tomorrow at -12 and -7 the high tomorrow with winds out of the north gusting to 30. Your 7-day looks like this with sunshine for both Saturday and Sunday. Watch, though, for a chance of flurries through the later part of Saturday into Sunday. -1 for Sunday. Good chance we'll see some light snow on Monday, moving through Tuesday, and then temperatures dipping a little bit. -11 for Wednesday with a mix of sun and clouds and mainly sunny, and -6 on the way for Thursday.
Down in Carmen today.
Yeah, I was in that area.
Shot the video.
Yep.
Of all those turkeys. There were a lot of them. How many?
There's a lot of them. There's probably about 2 dozen of those turkeys.
And they're big.
They're very big animals.
Big. Speaking of animals, here's your daily lift. This is video of an animal rescue worker in England getting outfoxed. See, the critter stole his phone. This is fox video. The fox actually shot this as it was running away with the man's phone. Poor guy was trying to help another fox that was injured. Eventually, this guy, though, gets bored, drops the phone. And the good news is the injured fox got helped and the man got his phone back.
How do you credit video like that? Credit it to the fox? Or?
Credit the crafty fox.
Okay.
Courtesy,
Sounds good.
crafty fox.
See ya.
See you tomorrow.